Hi, my name is Andrew Valdovinos, and this is the story of George Orwell. In the beginning, on the 25th of June, 1903, at Motihari, Bengal, India, Eric Arthur Blair, or better known as George Orwell, was born. The Blairs. Richard Walmsley Blair was the father of George Orwell. He was a British man who was stationed at the British Raj, now India, for the Indian Civil Service. And his mother, Ida Mabel Limousin, was a French woman and a poor merchant worker at the British rule in Burma. Orwell was the second Blair child. The first was his sister Marjorie Frances Duncan, born on April 21, 1898 at Bengal, India. A year after Orwell's birth, his mother decided to take him, along with his older sister, to Henley-on-Thames, Oxfordshire, England. Orwell's father, however, stayed behind. The Blairs would only see him on his days off, but he would have to return back to India to work. Richard wouldn't see his family until his retirement in 1912. Avril Blair, the last Blair child, was born on 1908 at Henley-on-Thames, Oxfordshire, England. Now back to Orwell. In 1911, Orwell attended to St. Cyprian's boarding school. In school, many of his classmates recognized him being poor. Orwell does mention later in his life that his family's social status is a lower middle class. However, his classmates did recognize him as a smart kid. In 1914, Orwell's poem Awake Young Men of England was published on the newspaper during World War I. After St. Cyprian's, Orwell attended to Eton College for about 4 years. When his family couldn't pay for his college, Orwell moved to Burma to serve for the Indian Imperial Police. But being a colonial police officer was very difficult for Orwell because he felt terrible for the Burmese living under British rules, which caused him self-discrimination. After 5 years, Orwell returned to England with horrible memories and promised himself to never return to Burma. When he arrived in England, he started a new life of becoming a writer, and he moved to Paris. However, Orwell was living in horrible conditions in Paris, and when he moved back to England, he was still living in the same conditions. This caused him to write his first novel, Down and Out in Paris and London, describing his experiences living in poverty. After that, Burmese Days was published, containing themes based on Orwell's experiences at Burma. After Orwell's first 2 novels were published, around the 1930s, he became an anti-imperialist and a socialist. From 1934 to 1935, Orwell worked at the Book Lovers' Corner at Hampstead, England. During those years, his book A Clergyman's Daughter was published, and at his new job, he met a woman named Eileen O'Shaughnessy, and he would propose to her in 1936. The year Orwell married his wife was also the year when the Spanish Civil War was taking place in Spain. By the end of 1936, Orwell joined the battle and was with the Republican side fighting against the Nationalists. During this conflict, A Road to Wigan Pier was published, which is about Orwell experiences living with underemployed miners of northern England. Everything was going fine for Orwell until in 1937 when he got shot on the throat at Teruel, and then later on he was forced to flee the country in fear after battling the communists at Barcelona. The experiences Orwell dealt with during the Spanish Civil War caused him to write his autobiography book, Homage to Catalonia. In 1938, Orwell was at Morocco, and he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. In 1939, Orwell's father passed away. A year after Orwell was diagnosed with tuberculosis, his book Coming Up for Air was published, which describes his fear of future wars and Nazism. When Orwell returned to England in 1941, he got a job at the BBC as a propagandist during World War II and worked there for 2 years. After those 2 years, Orwell became a literary editor for the socialist magazine Tribune. In 1943, Orwell's mother died from a heart attack. Outside from work, in 1944, Orwell and his wife adopted a 1-month-old boy and named him Richard Horatio Blair. However, tragedy would struck in Orwell's small family. On March 29, 1945, Eileen Blair died from an anesthesia operation. Instead of being a single father, Orwell had to ask his sister Avril Blair to raise his son Richard. After the tragedy, Orwell's book Animal Farm was published, which was based on the Russian Revolution and Stalin's betrayal. 3 years after Animal Farm was published, Orwell was back at the hospital due to tuberculosis on his left lung. While at the hospital, Orwell was working on his last novel, which will be a successful novel and a terrifying novel for our future. While working on his last book, Orwell married his second wife, Sonia Mary Brownell. In 1949, Orwell's last novel, 1984, was published. The theme of this book is the fear of totalitarianism. However, something more terrifying was coming after this novel. On the 21st of June, 1950, George Orwell died from tuberculosis. His works have inspired the world by providing a warning sign to its reader about politics and power. I'm Andrew Valdovinos, and this is the story of George Orwell. Thank you for watching.